I shouldn't be telling you this. Every instinct I have says that speaking about it only makes it easier for it to notice, but silence feels worse, like holding my breath while something waits for me to blink. I need you to understand this before anything else. What we watched wasn't broken, and it wasn't a glitch. It was working exactly as intended, just not for us. The moment it happened is burned into me, looping on repeat. 1 second, it was a boring live stream. The kind you leave running while you half scroll on your phone, background noise to keep the quiet away. The next second, the air in the room felt heavier, like the sound had weight to it. I remember leaning closer to the screen without realizing I was doing it, my heart already racing before my brain could catch up. That's when the counter froze. Not the video, not the audio, just the timestamp. It stopped at exactly 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 43 seconds, even though the stream kept going. I didn't know why that mattered yet, only that it felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Later, I'd learned that humans weren't supposed to stay past that point. Later, I'd understand that the stream wasn't meant to be watched continuously, but sampled, skimmed, abandoned. We didn't abandon it. I remember laughing nervously, saying something about bad servers or latency, pretending this was normal internet nonsense. But the laughter died when the voice on the stream paused mid-sentence and corrected itself, like it had realized we were still there. It didn't look at the camera. It looked through it. Through us. That's when the thought hit me, sharp and undeniable. This thing wasn't performing. It was observing. And observation came with consequences. At that second, every instinct screamed that we had crossed an invisible line, one nobody had bothered to warn us about. I'm telling you this now because watching too long changes you. Not all at once. Subtly. Quietly. You don't notice it until the world starts feeling slightly off, like a dream you can't wake up from. If you've ever fallen asleep with a live stream still playing, if you've ever woken up to audio you don't remember choosing, this is for you. Let me explain how we found it. I was with Mason and Lena that night, crammed into my apartment living room like we'd done 100 times before, 3 adults refusing to admit we were bored out of our minds. It was close to midnight, that dead hour when everything online feels slightly cheaper, slightly weirder. Mason was stretched out on the floor, scrolling aimlessly on his phone, narrating his disappointment with humanity in real time. Lena sat cross-legged on the couch, laptop balanced on her knees, pretending to work while clearly not working at all. Internet's dry tonight, Mason said. No good drama, no good horror, just ads pretending to be people. Give it 5 minutes, Lena replied. Someone will fake a haunting for clout. They always do. I was the one flipping through live streams, half watching, half listening, the way you do when you're killing time but don't want to be alone with your thoughts. Cooking streams. A guy silently assembling a keyboard. A woman sleeping with rain sounds piped through bad speakers. Normal. Boring. Safe. Then I clicked on one with no thumbnail. The title was empty, just a blank space where words should have been. The channel name underneath wasn't a name at all, just a string of symbols that looked like someone had leaned on a keyboard too long. It had 12 viewers, according to the counter, and that number never changed. Not up, not down. Wow. Mason muttered, leaning up on one elbow. This one's trying really hard to look creepy. The stream itself didn't deliver. It was a dim room, maybe a basement or a cheap studio, lit by a single overhead bulb. A person sat at a table, mostly out of frame, their voice muffled and uneven, like the mic was too far away. They were talking about something technical, rambling in that monotonous way that kills interest fast. This is it, Lena asked. This is what you stopped on. Give it a second, I said, already hovering my cursor over the close button. We waited. Nothing happened. No jump scares. No hidden messages. Just bad audio and worse pacing. The kind of stream you'd assume was abandoned by everyone except the algorithm. That viewer count's busted, Mason said. Been stuck at 12 this whole time. I glanced at the chat. Or tried to. There was nothing there. No replay. No scrolling history. Not even a notice saying it was disabled. Just an empty column, like a space waiting to be filled. Probably a bug, I said, shrugging. Whole sites held together with duct tape. Lena frowned at the screen, chewing her lip. Still, she said. It feels unfinished. Like we walked in halfway through something. Mason snorted. Or it's just some guy who forgot to end his stream and went to make a sandwich. We would have left it there, honestly. Another forgettable click in a long night of nothing. I even moved the mouse, ready to close the tab, when the speaker on the stream fell silent. The overhead light flickered once. The timer hit 0. And instead of ending, the stream kept going for us. That was the first sign. The first thing we noticed was the sound. Or rather, the delay in it. The person on the screen would move their mouth, and the words would arrive a heartbeat later, just enough to make my skin crawl. At first I blamed my speakers. Then Mason paused the stream, hit play again, and the delay stayed exactly the same, like it was baked into the feed. "Okay," he said, forcing a laugh. "That's mildly cursed." Lena leaned closer, eyes narrowed. "Say something in chat," she said to me. Just to see. I typed a simple question, something harmless, and didn't even press enter before the voice on the stream stuttered. The person tilted their head, as if listening, and answered the question out loud. Word for word. My finger was still hovering over the key. None of us laughed that time. "That's not possible," I said, my mouth dry. "There's lag. There's always lag." The stream crackled softly, the audio warping like it was being adjusted in real time. The camera angle shifted a few degrees, slow and deliberate, centering itself more precisely on the speaker's face. No hands touched it. No controls appeared. "It reacted to us," Lena whispered. Mason shook his head, smiling too hard. No, it's just a coincidence. Confirmation bias. You expect something weird, you find it." But his eyes never left the screen. I typed again, this time nonsense, a string of letters. The speaker paused, frowned, and said, "Input unclear." Then the words appeared across the bottom of the video in stark white text. "Non-target viewers detected." The message lingered for less than a second before vanishing, but it left a weight in the room that didn't fade. The viewer count still read 12. Lena stood up abruptly. "I don't like this. I'm serious. We should turn it off." She didn't move toward the laptop. She stayed where she was, hands clenched at her sides, staring like she was afraid to blink. The stream continued, the speaker resuming their rambling explanation, but the tone had shifted. The cadence changed, words landing with strange emphasis, as if something else was shaping them. Every so often, the camera drifted again, correcting itself, keeping us perfectly framed in its attention. I became painfully aware of the room around us, of how quiet it was, of how the hum of the refrigerator had stopped, or maybe I had just stopped hearing it. My pulse felt synced to the flicker of the screen. I had the sudden, overwhelming sense that this wasn't a broadcast in the way we understood it. It wasn't meant for everyone. It wasn't even meant to be found. It was targeted, precise, like a signal sweeping across channels until it found the right frequency. There were rules governing it, invisible boundaries we'd crossed without knowing, protocols written for something other than human curiosity, enforced without warning or mercy. And we were wrong. We weren't supposed to notice, linger, or question, and every second we stayed felt like another violation logged somewhere unseen by something vast nearby. "Who is this for?" Mason asked quietly. The speaker stopped talking. They looked directly into the camera for the first time and said our city's name out loud. The chat appeared all at once, like a curtain pulled back by an unseen hand. 1 second the column was empty, a hollow placeholder, and the next it was alive with motion. Lines of text streamed downward in bursts, too fast to read at first, made up of symbols that hurt to look at for too long. Not letters, not numbers, shapes that suggested meaning without offering it. Usernames scrolled past that looked nothing like names. Strings of coordinates, anatomical references, measurements that shifted every time I tried to focus on them. The timestamps were worse. Some were hours ahead of the current time, others dated decades into the future, a few stamped with seconds that hadn't happened yet. My stomach turned as I realized none of it was meant to be archived. "The chat wasn't talking to the streamer," I said slowly. "It's coordinating." Mason let out a short, sharp laugh. "That's a weird way to describe spam." But his voice cracked at the end. The messages didn't react to the speaker's words. They pulsed in rhythm with us. When Lena shifted on the couch, the scroll accelerated. When Mason covered his eyes, the flow doubled, lines stacking over each other like something growing impatient. I forced myself to stare straight at the screen, and for a brief, horrifying moment, the chat slowed, almost as if it approved. One line broke through in plain text. Observation phase continues. It sat there, pinned in the middle of the chaos, before dissolving back into symbols. I felt cold, deeply aware of my own breathing. Another message followed, isolated and unmistakable. Subject, primary viewer. My chest tightened. I hadn't typed anything. I hadn't moved. Okay, Lena whispered. I'm done. This is too much. She reached for the power strip, then froze, eyes locked on the chat as it surged violently, the scroll blurring into a solid block of motion. It was responding to her intention, not her action. The faster she tried to look away, the faster it moved, as if daring her to miss something important. I'm telling you this now because I need to know if it's just us. If this sounds familiar, if you've ever seen a chat that didn't feel like people talking, but like something organizing itself, tell me in the comments. I'm not asking out of curiosity. I'm asking because patterns matter. The stream's audio popped loudly, snapping us all back into place. The symbols vanished. The chat went blank again, as if it had never existed. It felt invasive in a way I didn't have language for then, like being overheard by something inside my own head. I could sense a tension pressing in from the edges of the room, from the screen, from somewhere behind it. Whatever rules governed this place, we were now variables, inputs being tested, cataloged, compared against baselines we couldn't see, let alone understand. Every instinct told me this was only the beginning, and beginnings here were the most dangerous ones. The person on screen leaned forward, eyes finally meeting the camera, and spoke directly to us for the first time. The change wasn't dramatic at first. It would have been easier if it was. No jump scare, no sudden scream. Just a subtle hesitation, like a skipped frame in a video you'd watched too many times. The host's face twitched, smile holding a fraction too long, eyes unfocused for a beat before snapping back into place. His speech slowed, syllables separating as if they were being chosen individually instead of spoken naturally. I apologize, he said, then stopped. His mouth stayed open, lips trembling. Correction, that apology was not intended for you. Mason swallowed hard. Did he just? I'm sorry. The host continued, voice flattening. Auditory output exceeded containment parameters. You weren't supposed to hear that. The words landed wrong. Not threatening. Administrative. Like a form being filed incorrectly. His eyes flicked off camera, tracking something we couldn't see. He nodded once, sharply, then looked back at us. His expression rearranged itself, trying and failing to look human again. The smile came back crooked, muscles lagging behind intention. Confirming, he said, "Are you baseline biological viewers?" Lena let out a small, broken sound that might have been a laugh. Baseline what? The host blinked. Too many times. Too fast. Apologies. That phrasing is deprecated. He tilted his head, listening again. You were not included in the initial distribution. A translucent overlay flickered across the screen, gone before I could fully register it. White lines, grids, diagnostic text scrolling vertically like a hospital monitor. Heart rate graphs, neural response curves, labels that made my stomach twist. Subject recognition, adaptive response. The feed stuttered, then snapped back to the dim room. I'm really sorry about this, the host said, and this time the words sounded almost sincere. Almost. This is usually cleaner. His face was still human. Skin, pores, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. But the intent behind his eyes wasn't. It felt procedural, detached, the way you might look at a malfunctioning device. Or a lab animal. The contrast made my head spin, like staring at something wearing a mask it didn't need, but used anyway out of habit. We can turn it off, Mason said, though he didn't move. Right? We can just close it. The host gaze sharpened. Termination has already been evaluated. A pause. Outcome, inconclusive. Another flicker. The overlays returned, more stable this time. Sections of the screen highlighted, isolating parts of the image. The audio shifted, frequencies compressing, adjusting around our breathing, our small movements. It was tuning itself, refining the signal. Learning. I truly regret the discomfort, the host murmured, eyes drifting past the camera again. But now that you've been identified, adjustments are necessary. The stream didn't feel passive anymore. It felt engaged, attentive, like something had leaned forward on the other side of the screen, focusing on us specifically, and I knew with cold certainty that whatever happened next would be shaped by how we reacted right now. It started subtly, the way a room changes temperature without you noticing until you're already uncomfortable. The lighting on the stream warmed when Mason leaned forward, casting softer shadows, while the audio sharpened when Lena spoke, isolating her voice like it mattered more. When I stayed silent, the camera zoomed in by degrees so small I felt them more than I saw them. It wasn't random. It was adjusting. It was learning us. Mason was the first to react physically. He pressed a hand to his mouth, color draining from his face. "I feel sick," he muttered, swaying slightly, eyes locked on the screen even as his body rebelled. The feed responded instantly, flickering through images that made my eyes sting to look at. Warped corridors that felt too narrow, extreme close-ups of skin and blinking eyes, the sensation of falling without ever landing. Mason gagged and turned away, but the visuals intensified, chasing him like a punishment for resistance. Lena somehow smiled. Not wide, not happy, calm, too calm. Her shoulders relaxed as the stream softened around her, colors deepening into something almost beautiful, patterns forming that pulled the eye inward instead of pushing it away. "It's not that bad," she said dreamily. "It's like it understands." The overlays shifted again, tagging her feed differently, smoothing edges, rewarding stillness, as if compliance earned gentler treatment. I stayed between them, heart pounding, feeling the attention settle on me like a spotlight I couldn't step out of. The host's face filled the screen, eyes tracking my micro-expressions, my breaths, the tension in my jaw. I had this sick realization that it knew who would break first, who would submit willingly, and who might adapt just enough to be useful. The chat flashed briefly, only one line this time, stark and final. Human tolerance exceeded. Mason collapsed to his knees, dry heaving, hands shaking violently. Lena leaned closer, entranced, pupils blown wide, whispering things she wouldn't remember later. The stream adjusted again, splitting its focus, calibrating responses with terrifying efficiency. This wasn't entertainment. It was a test. Thresholds were being measured, reactions categorized, outcomes predicted with cold precision. "It wants consent," I whispered, though I didn't know how I knew it. Just not verbally. The host nodded, slow and approving, as if I'd finally said something correct. "Continued exposure implies acceptance," he said gently, like a doctor explaining a procedure you were already undergoing. Mason crawled toward the door, dragging himself across the floor. "I'm done," he gasped. "I'm leaving." He grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing happened. Mason never made it to the door. His hand slipped off the handle, fingers twitching like they'd forgotten their purpose, and he slumped sideways onto the floor. His eyes rolled back, showing too much white, and then he went completely still. Not asleep, not resting, gone, like someone had flipped a switch inside him. I shouted his name, my voice sounding distant and wrong in my own ears, but he didn't respond. At the same time, Lena's phone vibrated. She looked down at it slowly, as if moving underwater. "I got a message," she said, calm as ever. "From who?" I asked. She turned the screen toward me. The sender name was the same string of symbols as the channel. The timestamp read now, even though the stream was still live. The message contained only 4 words. "You don't log out. You're dismissed." The ringing started then, high and piercing, drilling straight through my skull. I clutched my ears, but it wasn't coming from outside. It felt internal, like my brain was vibrating against the inside of my skull. The room stretched and snapped back, time hiccuping in uneven beats. Seconds elongated, then collapsed, leaving me dizzy and gasping. The host smiled sadly. Subject instability detected, he said. Session integrity compromised. The overlays surged one last time. Harsher now, filled with red warnings and scrolling text I couldn't process fast enough. Mason groaned faintly, a sound that cut off too abruptly to be natural. Lena swayed on the couch, eyes unfocused, still staring at her phone like it was the only thing anchoring her. And then the stream ended. No sign-off, no fade-out, just a dead screen, the abrupt quiet roaring louder than any sound before it. My laptop fan whined as if confused, the sudden normalcy of the desktop feeling obscene. The viewer count disappeared. The channel was gone. I dropped to the floor beside Mason, shaking him, calling his name over and over until my throat burned. His chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. Alive. For now. Lena blinked, the calm draining from her face as fear rushed back in all at once. What happened? She whispered. Why does it feel like we lost hours? I checked the time. Only 12 minutes had passed since the stream began. The ringing in my ears didn't stop. It followed me into the kitchen, into the bathroom, into bed that night. She looked down at it slowly, as if moving underwater. I got a message, she said, calm as ever. From who? I asked. She turned the screen toward me. The sender name was the same string of symbols as the channel. The timestamp read now, even though the stream was still live. The message contained only 4 words. You don't log out. You're dismissed. The ringing started then, high and piercing, drilling straight through my skull. I clutched my ears, but it wasn't coming from outside. It felt internal, like my brain was vibrating against the inside of my skull. The room stretched and snapped back, time hiccuping in uneven beats. Seconds elongated, then collapsed, leaving me dizzy and gasping. The host smiled sadly. Subject instability detected, he said. Session integrity compromised. The overlays surged one last time. Harsher now, filled with red warnings and scrolling text I couldn't process fast enough. Mason groaned faintly, a sound that cut off too abruptly to be natural. Lena swayed on the couch, eyes unfocused, still staring at her phone like it was the only thing anchoring her. And then the stream ended. No sign-off, no fade-out, just a dead screen, the abrupt quiet roaring louder than any sound before it. My laptop fan whined as if confused, the sudden normalcy of the desktop feeling obscene. The viewer count disappeared. The channel was gone. I dropped to the floor beside Mason, shaking him, calling his name over and over until my throat burned. His chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. Alive. For now. Lena blinked, the calm draining from her face as fear rushed back in all at once. What happened? She whispered. Why does it feel like we lost hours? I checked the time. Only 12 minutes had passed since the stream began. The ringing in my ears didn't stop. It followed me into the kitchen, into the bathroom, into bed that night. When I closed my eyes, I saw diagnostic overlays burned into the dark, ghost images that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I couldn't stop thinking about the message, about the wording, about how final it sounded. Dismissed. Not released. Not safe. The silence afterward was worse than the stream itself. No answers. No closure. Just the lingering sense that something had started and hadn't bothered to finish. I found myself replaying every second, every word, every flicker, obsessively searching for meaning, for warnings I'd missed, for proof that this was over. It wasn't. The days after blurred together, heavy and sleepless, like my body had forgotten how to power down. I'd wake up to the sound of voices that weren't there, convinced a stream was playing somewhere in the apartment. Mason slept for nearly 20 hours straight, then woke up confused, aggressive, and unable to explain where he'd been. Lena barely slept at all. She spent nights scrolling, eyes bloodshot, jumping at notification sounds that never came. Within a week, she deleted every social account she owned without explanation. No goodbye posts, no backups, no way to contact her except through me. The internet didn't let me forget. Ads followed me across sites, their imagery wrong in subtle ways. The same symbols from the chat, the same geometry, rearranged just enough to avoid detection. I'd pause a video and catch a single frame that didn't belong, gone before I could screenshot it. At night, my ears rang constantly, a high tone that pulsed whenever I thought about the stream. Time still felt wrong, slipping forward in uneven jumps. I started searching, digging through forums, archived threads, half-deleted posts written by people who sounded too calm about things that should have terrified them. They talked about blank titles, frozen counters, chats that weren't for human eyes. Most links were dead. Entire channels wiped clean, as if they'd never existed. People warned about signs, headaches, distorted sleep, the feeling of being watched even offline. Reading it felt like reading my own diary. If any of this sounds familiar to you, pay attention. These are the warning signs nobody puts in the description. The worst part was realizing how small this was. This wasn't one stream or one accident. It was a system, and I finally found proof. Buried deep in an old archive, I found references to broadcasts stretching back years, all ending the same way. Blank pages, missing files, comments cut off mid-sentence. Whatever we saw wasn't new. It was ongoing, and it was bigger than us. That realization settled in my chest like a second heartbeat, steady and impossible to ignore. I stopped trying to convince myself this would fade. Instead, I started looking for patterns. What I found changed everything. There were clusters of incidents, waves of reports that spiked and vanished, always tied to late-night viewing and unexplained fatigue. Some posts mentioned messages received after the stream ended, phrased like instructions rather than threats. Others described people simply disappearing from online spaces, leaving behind accounts that stopped updating mid-scroll. Reading it all, I understood the silence wasn't safety. It was preparation. Whatever this system was doing, it wasn't finished observing us. And that's when I found something that proved this wasn't random at all. A pattern so deliberate it felt intentional. A design. One that explained why we were chosen and why others never even noticed the stream existed. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. That was when I knew this was only the beginning. Much worse. Much bigger. Once I stopped looking at our experience as an isolated incident, everything snapped into place. The stream wasn't random. It wasn't experimental. It was standardized. I found fragments of the same structure repeated across years. Blank titles, frozen counters, delayed audio, sudden chats full of symbols, and then silence. Always silence. Different platforms, different regions, same bones underneath. That's when the theories stopped sounding crazy and started sounding incomplete. Some people blamed non-human intelligence. Others said advanced AI, misaligned, quietly optimizing something we couldn't perceive. A few posts suggested something older than technology using it like a skin, wearing live streams the way parasites wear hosts. The common thread wasn't what it was, but what it wanted. Not chaos, not spectacle, selection, recruitment, or filtration. That question came up again and again. Was it choosing people who could adapt, or eliminating those who couldn't? The answer, I think, is both. The broadcast wasn't meant to be watched the way humans watch content. It was meant to be sampled, glanced at, abandoned. Staying past the threshold wasn't bravery. It was disobedience. Humans weren't meant to stay because staying meant participating, and participation carried consequences. There were rules, implied but consistent. Don't interact. Don't focus too long. Don't let it know you're aware. People who broke one rule sometimes walked away shaken but intact. People who broke all of them vanished, digitally or otherwise. Accounts wiped, messages unanswered, lives narrowing into silence. Most people failed before they realized they were being tested, which was the point. Awareness itself was part of the filter. I started to see the pattern everywhere. Viewer counts that never changed. Streams that ended without warning. Ads that felt too personal. Sleeplessness. Ringing ears. The sense of being nudged towards screens at specific hours. It wasn't overt control. It was suggestion, probability, gentle pressure applied over time. Enough to guide behavior without triggering resistance. And here's the part one need you to consider carefully. If you're still listening, if this feels uncomfortably specific, that might not be coincidence. The system doesn't announce itself. It observes quietly until you prove you can see it. Reading this, engaging with it, Recognizing the signs, those are data points too. I don't know what threshold you're at. I don't know mine either. The worst stories were the ones where people described a second contact. A return stream. Unlisted. Personalized. No chat. No audience. Just a continuation. They always framed it like an invitation, never a threat. And that's how it got them. Because curiosity feels like consent when fear stops working. I thought we were done after that night. I thought dismissal meant closure. I was wrong. 3 days ago, while scrolling half asleep, a notification appeared on my screen. No sound, no vibration, just a quiet banner from a channel that shouldn't exist anymore. The title was blank. The stream was live, and it was only for me. I didn't click it right away. I stared at the notification until the screen dimmed, my reflection staring back at me like a stranger. When I finally opened it, there was no countdown, no thumbnail loading in, just the feed, already running, as if it had been waiting for me to notice. The room on screen was different this time. Brighter, clean, no flickering bulb, no shadowed corners. The camera was perfectly still. There was no chat panel at all, not even the empty placeholder from before. Just a single line of text centered at the bottom of the screen. You adapted well. My throat tightened. That's debatable, I muttered, unsure why I bothered speaking aloud. The host appeared a moment later, framed neatly, posture relaxed. He looked more human than before, which somehow made it worse. His movements were smoother, his expressions less strained, like he'd practiced. Or upgraded. Thank you for returning, he said. Continuation was not guaranteed. I didn't agree to anything, I said. He nodded. Agreement is not binary. You remained. You observed. You saw context. Those are qualifying behaviors. Images began to cycle behind him, slow and deliberate. Abstract shapes resolving into familiar scenes. City streets at night. People staring at their phones, faces lit by screens. Data layered over everything, translucent and pulsing. I felt a strange warmth in my chest, a sense of recognition that scared me more than fear ever had. What do you want? I asked. To offer clarity, he replied. Your species struggles with incomplete information. It causes distress. You experience that distress. He leaned forward slightly. We can reduce it. The image is sharpened. For a moment, I felt like I could see patterns beneath the noise of the world, connections I'd never noticed before. It was intoxicating, terrifying. Understanding dangled just out of reach, close enough to hurt. And the others? I asked. Mason, Lena, all the names I'd read in dead threads and half-erased posts. They reached different thresholds, the host said evenly. You did not. I realized then that this wasn't a threat. It was an invitation, a choice framed to feel inevitable. Fear pressed me backward, urging me to close the tab, to run, to cling to whatever normalcy I had left. Curiosity pulled harder, whispering promises of answers, of expanded perception, of not being lost in the dark anymore. Humans call this consent, the host said softly. We call it continuation. My ears rang, the familiar tone rising as if in anticipation. My cursor hovered over the close button, trembling. I knew what staying meant. I knew what leaving might cost. I took a breath, and I chose. I didn't disappear after that night. That's the first thing people expect when I tell this part, like staying should have erased me completely. Instead, I went back to work. I answered emails. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. From the outside, I functioned. That was the price. I was allowed to keep living, as long as I carried what I'd seen quietly. Something rewired itself while I was watching. Not dramatically. No glowing eyes or sudden genius. Just subtle misalignments. Conversations lag half a second behind meaning. Faces feel flatter, like masks I remember how to wear, but not how to believe in. When people talk, I notice patterns instead of stories, probabilities instead of intentions. It makes small talk exhausting and silence unbearable. I try to go back to normal life like it was a software update I could uninstall. I told myself I'd just seen something weird online and my brain was filling in the gaps. That excuse works until you start predicting things, until ads appear before you search, until you know who's about to look at their phone, who's going to leave the room, who's already being nudged towards something they don't understand yet. Mason recovered, technically. He laughs louder now. Too loud, like volume can cover the emptiness behind his eyes. Lena never came back online. No new accounts. No digital footprint. She exists only in old photos and my memory, which feels less reliable every day. The stream never contacted me again. It didn't need to. I carry it with me, a quiet filter layered over reality. Sometimes, when I stare at a screen too long, I see the overlays trying to come back, like a reflex. I look away before they can settle. Here's the dark joke of it. Everyone wants to feel special, chosen, seen. Turns out, being noticed is the worst thing that can happen to you. I wasn't upgraded. I was tagged, labeled as compatible. That's not power. That's inventory. I don't think I'm fully human anymore. Not in the way I was. I still feel fear, but it's muted, distant, like an echo instead of a scream. Curiosity, though, that's sharper than ever. That's how I know this isn't over. Systems like that don't stop observing. They wait. Which is why I'm telling you now. Because if you've noticed the same patterns, the same glitches, the same pull towards screens at night, you deserve a warning before it decides you're ready to. Pay attention to the small changes. The way videos recommend themselves. The way time slips when you watch late. If a stream has no title, no history, no reason to exist, don't stay curious. Close it. Walk away. Curiosity feels harmless, but it's the metric they track most closely. And if, while listening to this, you feel that familiar ringing start up again, that subtle sense of recognition, understand this. It already knows you're here, and it's deciding whether you're worth continuing. That decision, once made, is rarely reversed, and nobody ever announces when the evaluation officially ends. Silence is usually the final confirmation given. If this video buffers, don't refresh it right away. Listen first. Pay attention to the sound, to whether it stutters or stretches, to whether the silence feels heavier than it should. Those are the first signs. Buffering where there shouldn't be buffering. Audio slipping out of sync by just enough to make your skin prickle. Symbols that look wrong but familiar, like you've seen them somewhere you can't remember. I'm talking to you now, directly, because this is how it spreads best. Not through fear, but through curiosity and pattern recognition. If anything I've said tonight feels uncomfortably specific, that's not an accident. It never was. This is one case, one account. There are others. I've read them. Some ended here. Some stopped mid-sentence. If you've experienced something similar, say it out loud. Put it in the comments. Compare notes. Patterns lose power when they're exposed, even if exposure carries risk. Just don't post links. Don't share channels. Don't try to prove it exists. That's how you move from observer to participant. Watch for the signs. Streams with no titles. Viewer counts that don't move. Chats that appear only when you're paying attention. If a video ends without saying goodbye, let it end. Don't wait for closure. Closure is a hook. And if you ever see a live stream with 0 viewers, understand this. It's not empty. It's waiting. It's watching to see who stays, who scrolls past, who thinks they're immune because they've heard the warning already. I wish I could tell you there's a way to opt out completely. There isn't. There's only minimizing exposure, breaking patterns, refusing to be predictable. Turn things off. Go outside. Sit with silence even when it feels uncomfortable. Especially then. This isn't the end of the story. It never is. These broadcasts cycle. They adapt. They come back quieter, cleaner, harder to notice. If this video glitches near the end, if the audio cuts for just a second, don't rewind. That's not an error. That's a check. And if you're still here, still listening, still curious, then you already understand the most important rule. The moment you realize you're being watched is the moment you're added to the list. After that, it's only a matter of time before the stream finds you again. It doesn't announce itself when the cycle resets. There's no notification, no warning banner, no sound. Just a subtle pull, a suggestion placed where a thought used to be. You'll wonder why you're awake, why you're scrolling, why one thumbnail feels heavier than the rest. That's how it starts. Quietly, casually, like nothing important is happening at all. Until it is. And when that moment comes, remember this wasn't meant to scare you away. It was meant to give you a choice. Most people never realize they had one. If you're still watching after this, ask yourself why, and who benefits from that answer right now here.